Mike with the Florida Public Archaeology Network, and today we're going to explore the history, the archaeology, and the ecology of the Fred Gannon Rocky Bayou State Park. The Fred Gannon Rocky Bayou State Park is not a huge park, but it has 357 acres of recreational opportunities. All sorts of different types of activities, from hiking to kayaking and paddling to even camping here. But part of the name of this state park came from the fact that it's right next to what's known as Rocky Bayou. And Rocky Bayou is an aquatic preserve, and a bayou is simply a body of water that's slow flowing or that stands relatively still, that's connected to a river or a lake, or in this case, it's actually connected to Choctawhatchee Bay. Now, the bayou is actually fed by 3 different freshwater sources. One is Rocky Creek, another is Turkey Creek, and there's a number of different steephead creeks that all flow into the Rocky Bayou, making it a bayou. But of course, the other part of this state park's name is Fred Gannon. It was named after Air Force Colonel Fred Gannon, and in the 1950s, he advocated for turning this land into a recreational area. But before this area became a recreational area in a state park, it's not an area that you'd really want to hang out in. That is because in the 1940s, this land was actually used for gunnery practice and bombing practice by what's now the United States Air Force. But probably the most significant connection that this land has to the US military comes from its connection to the Doolittle Raiders. On December 7th, 1941, the United States was attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. This came as a complete surprise attack to most Americans. In fact, Americans were very concerned and worried, so much so that a number of men actually enlisted into the United States military because they knew that at that point their country would be involved directly in military actions in World War II. In fact, both of my grandfathers, one served in the Army, the other served in the Navy. Both of them, right after Pearl Harbor, went in and enlisted to fight in the military. But of course, a lot of the country, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, they were angry. They wanted to strike back. So in January of 1942, a plan was hatched to strike a blow back to the Japanese, and part of this area has a connection to that mission.
Now it can be told. History in the making as the mysterious Shangri-La. Actually, the United States Navy aircraft carrier Hornet steams westward across the Pacific. Packed on the afterdeck of the Hornet are 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers. Never before have these huge planes been launched from a carrier. High explosive and demolition bombs are made ready for the destruction of military objectives in Japan.
Not far from the Rocky Bayou State Park is the Air Force Armament Museum. And what's really cool about this museum is they have displays inside the museum that talk all about the Doolittle raid. And they also have on display outside one of their many airplanes on display is a B-25 Mitchell. A month after the attack on Pearl Harbor, a plan was underway for a secret mission, a joint Army and Navy mission to strike back at mainland Japan. And the idea called for B-25 Mitchells, like the one behind me, to take off from a US aircraft carrier and then strike a blow to the Japanese mainland by bombing industrial centers, as well as striking in a psychological blow to the Japanese. The man tasked with planning this secret mission was a lieutenant colonel named James Doolittle, and this mission became known as the Doolittle Raid. But in order to plan for this secret mission, they needed an area where they could do it in secrecy, as well as in an area where they could practice bombing and flying over open water. And so the place that they chose to do that was right here in Northwest Florida. Now, some of the remnants of this training mission, this secret training mission that became the Doolittle Raid, is located right here in this state park, just a little bit off the trail. And it is this large artifact right here. Let me show it to you. Now, the crews of Jimmy Doolittle's B-25 bombers that practiced here in 1942 used this area for, like I said, bombing practice, and they were dropping dummy bombs as well as live bombs. Some of the dummy bombs were filled up with sand, and then the live bombs, of course, were live. And then remnants of those bombs are still found throughout this area, including ones on land like this one. This is a cement dummy bomb that is believed to have been dropped during some of the training exercises of the Doolittle Raiders. After they completed their training here at Eglin, they loaded 16 of those B-25 bombers out in California onto the USS Hornet, and from there in April 1942 they left to go and do their mission. The plan was to get about 600 miles from Tokyo, but Japanese, they actually spotted the USS Hornet, so they had to launch a little bit earlier than they expected. But the mission went just as planned. The B-25 bombers took off from USS Hornet. They successfully bombed their industrial targets. Of course, there's so much more to the story of the Doolittle raid, so I'd encourage everybody to go out and visit the Air Force Armament Museum to learn about the full story and what happened to all the men that were part of that mission. Now, this body of water right behind me is the Rocky Bayou Aquatic Preserve, and it is a bayou, and we have a lot of great bayou areas across Northwest Florida, but unfortunately since the 1950s a lot of them have really declined in their quality, and that is largely due to development. So the building of subdivisions and roads throughout this area has really created a loss of not only vegetation but also increased the amount of water runoff from rains that wash into these bayous. And that creates a lot of problems because it takes all sorts of types of different pollutants, so everything from fertilizers to pesticides to animal waste to dead vegetation, all that flows into these bayous and creates a lot of problems. Anything from water clarity to fish kills to all a result of that development that we've had over the last several decades. Now, fortunately, there's a lot that we can do to help bring back these bayous. So planting living shorelines through planting grasses or through oyster reefs can really help with water clarity. And so a single oyster can actually filter 50 gallons of water per day. So that can have a huge impact. Other things we can do on an individual level. If you have a yard, if you have property, if you plant native species that don't require a lot of watering, that don't require a lot of pesticides or fertilizer, that can help really reduce the amount of water and as well as pollution that's ending up in these bayous. And that can help reduce the number of fish kills. It can help reduce the number of bacteria that sometimes really impacts these bayous negatively. And so we can all take little steps to help preserve and protect these incredibly rich areas of bayous here in Northwest Florida.